My name is Helena, and I am 32 years old. Everything in my life was peaceful until that fateful Sunday evening when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother, but the voice that came through belonged to my father, the man who abandoned us 15 years ago without a single word of explanation. My mother had always believed he would return someday, but when he finally did, it wasn't love that brought him back. If you are watching this, please hit like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Trust me, you will want to hear how I discovered that some people never return for you, only for what you have. I still remember the last normal day with my father. I was 17, a senior in high school, with dreams as vast as the Minnesota sky above our suburban home. We were your typical middle-class American family: mother, Emily, father Thomas, and me. Dad worked as a financial advisor at a respected local firm, while Mum taught third grade at the elementary school down the street. Our home wasn't lavish, but it was filled with laughter and love, or so I thought. That final morning started like any other. Dad was sitting at our kitchen table sipping coffee and reading the newspaper. He wore his favorite blue tie, the one Mum gave him for their 15th anniversary just months before. I remember the way he smiled when I came downstairs, how he asked about my calculus test scheduled for that day. "You will ace it, Helena," he said, his voice warm with confidence. "And this weekend, we will go looking at those college dorm supplies you wanted." Mum packed his lunch like she always did: turkey sandwich, apple, and those oatmeal cookies he loved. He kissed her goodbye, then pressed his lips to my forehead. "See you tonight, pumpkin," he said. Those were his last words to me. When evening came, his chair remained empty at dinner. Mum called his office, but they said he had left at the normal time. She called his friends, his brother, even the gym where he sometimes stopped after work. No one had seen him. The confusion in our house was palpable that night. Mum kept glancing at the door, checking her phone, making excuses. "Traffic must be terrible," she said. "Or maybe his car broke down and his phone died." But as midnight approached, even she could no longer deny something was wrong. We called the police, who took a missing persons report, but warned us that adults have the right to go missing if they choose. The next morning brought the discovery that would shatter our world completely. Dad had taken his passport, some clothes, and emptied half of their joint savings account. There was no note, no email, no text, nothing to explain why he walked out on 17 years of marriage and a daughter who adored him. I remember the detective asking if there had been signs of trouble. Had he seemed distant, unhappy? Were there arguments, financial problems, another woman? We had no answers. The night before he disappeared, we had watched a sitcom together, all laughing at the same jokes. He had helped me with my history homework. There was nothing to suggest he was planning to vanish from our lives forever. The first few weeks were a blur of police interviews, calls from concerned relatives, and Mum crying herself to sleep every night. I would lie awake in my bed listening to her sobs through the wall, feeling helpless and abandoned. The first holidays without him were the hardest. Thanksgiving featured an empty chair that nobody mentioned. For Christmas, Mum still hung his stocking, her hands trembling as she nailed it to the mantel beside ours. I found her one night stroking his winter coat, her face buried in the fabric as if trying to capture his scent before it faded completely. The question that haunted us both was simply, why? What makes a man walk away from his family without a word? What kind of father misses his only daughter's high school graduation, leaving an empty seat in the auditorium that felt like a black hole? What had we done wrong? I graduated second in my class that spring. As the principal called my name, I looked out at the audience stupidly, pathetically, still hoping to see his face in the crowd. Instead, I saw only Mom trying to smile through her tears, clutching a bouquet of flowers meant to compensate for his absence. But flowers cannot fill the void of abandonment. They cannot answer the questions that kept me awake night after night. My mother, however, refused to accept that he had chosen to leave. "Something must have happened," she would insist. "Your father would never abandon us voluntarily." This became her mantra in those early days, a shield against the painful truth that was becoming clearer with each passing day. He had walked away, and he had done it deliberately. The police investigation eventually went cold. There were no signs of foul play, no evidence of coercion. The detective gently suggested we accept that Thomas had started a new life somewhere else. But acceptance was a destination my mother was nowhere near ready to reach. The emotional toll was enormous. I developed insomnia that summer before college. Mum lost 20 pounds in 2 months. Our house, once warm with family energy, became a mausoleum of memories we could neither embrace fully nor completely exorcise. Sometimes I caught Mum staring at his empty closet space or touching his coffee mug that she refused to move from its hook in the kitchen. It was as if she believed that keeping these spaces reserved would somehow summon him back home. The absence of closure was like an open wound that could not heal, constantly reopened by the simple daily reminders of the life we had lost. The hardest part wasn't just that he was gone, it was that he had chosen to disappear without giving us the dignity of an explanation. That deliberate silence felt more cruel than any harsh words could have been. It left us to fill in the blanks with our imaginations, which often conjured scenarios more painful than reality might have been. Was there someone else? Had he secretly hated his life with us? These questions tortured me through those final months of high school as I tried to reconcile the loving father I thought I knew with the man who could walk away without a backward glance. With each passing day of that first year, the initial shock slowly transformed into a deep, persistent ache that would eventually become the background radiation of our lives, always present even when not consciously acknowledged. The years after my father vanished took on a strange rhythm defined by my mother's unwavering belief that there must be an explanation for his disappearance. She created theories that became increasingly elaborate as time passed. Perhaps he had amnesia and couldn't remember who he was. Maybe someone was forcing him to stay away to protect us. Could he be working undercover for some government agency? The reality that he had simply chosen to leave was the one possibility she refused to entertain. Every month, like clockwork, Mum would check his email account that somehow remained active. She knew his password, something simple and unchanged since they first got internet access, her birthday followed by mine. She would scan for any sign of activity, any clue to his whereabouts. There never was any. When it came time for college, I chose the University of Minnesota instead of Northwestern, which had been my dream school. I told myself it was for financial reasons, but truthfully, I couldn't bear the thought of leaving Mom alone in that house filled with ghosts. Mum kept Dad's clothes hanging in their closet, arranged exactly as they had been the day he left. His razor remained beside the bathroom sink. His favourite chair stayed angled toward the television, untouched, even when we had guests who needed a place to sit. The house became a time capsule, preserved in amber from that last normal day. "Your father would want things this way when he comes back," she would say whenever I suggested donating his clothes or rearranging the furniture. There was no arguing with her on this point. Her hope had calcified into something unbreakable. When relatives would visit and inevitably criticize him, Mum would leap to his defense. "You don't know what happened," she would snap. "None of us does." She maintained this protective stance even as years passed without a word from him. The financial impact hit us hard. Mum took on tutoring after school and summer school teaching to compensate for the loss of Dad's income. I worked part-time at the campus bookstore during college, sending most of my paychecks home to help with bills. We downsized from 2 cars to 1. Vacations became non-existent. Christmas gifts grew modest. The stress took a visible toll on Mum. Her hair, once a rich brown like mine, turned almost completely grey by the time I was 20. She developed migraines that would lay her up in darkened rooms for days. Her doctor prescribed anxiety medication that she took reluctantly, as if surrendering to reality might somehow jinx Dad's return. My own attempts at dating in college were disasters. The first guy I went out with, Sam, was patient and kind, but when he tried to hold my hand on our 3rd date, I burst into tears. How could I explain that the last man who loved me had disappeared without warning, that abandonment felt like an inheritance coursing through my veins, that I was terrified of relying on anyone who might vanish like morning mist? My graduation day from college brought all these feelings rushing back. Mum saved a seat beside her just in case. When no one claimed it, she placed the program on the empty chair, a gesture that broke my heart all over again. I managed to secure an entry-level position at a marketing firm in Minneapolis. The salary was modest, but it offered stability, something our family had been lacking for years. Still, financial struggles continued to dog us. The house needed a new roof we couldn't afford. Mum's car required expensive repairs. Medical bills piled up from her stress-related conditions. Every year on her birthday, Mum would close her eyes over the candles on her cake and make the same wish. She never said what it was, but I knew. For Dad to come home. For the mystery to be solved. For our family to be whole again. While Mum clung to hope, my own emotions evolved differently. The sadness that had initially engulfed me gradually hardened into anger. How dare he do this to us? What kind of man abandons his family without a word? The questions changed from, why did he leave, to how could he live with himself after what he did to us? I moved into my own apartment after 2 years at the marketing firm, but visited Mum several times a week. I couldn't shake the fear that she might disappear too if I wasn't checking on her regularly. Our roles had reversed. I had become the caretaker, she the vulnerable one. Therapy became my lifeline during this period. My counselor helped me understand the complex web of abandonment issues that now colored every relationship in my life. Your father's actions reflect on him, not you, Dr. Winters would tell me in our sessions. You are not unlovable. You are not the reason he left. Intellectually, I understood this. Emotionally, the wound remained raw. Mum refused all suggestions of therapy for herself. I don't need someone telling me to give up hope, she would say firmly. Everyone wants me to accept that he chose to leave us, but I know your father. He would never do that without a reason. The 10th anniversary of his disappearance came and went. A decade of silence. A decade of Mum waiting. A decade of me trying to build a life on a foundation fractured by abandonment. We didn't commemorate the date, but it hung in the air between us, unspoken but impossible to ignore. 10 years, and still she kept his coffee mug hanging on its hook. Change finally began in the 11th year after Dad left. I met James at a work conference in Chicago. He was presenting a session on digital marketing strategies, and I was instantly drawn to his thoughtful answers during the Q&A. We exchanged business cards, and when he emailed me the following week about an industry networking event in Minneapolis, I surprised myself by agreeing to meet him. Dating James wasn't easy. My trust issues surfaced almost immediately. I questioned his motives, analysed his texts for hidden meanings, and created emotional distance whenever things seemed to be going well. But James possessed a patience I had never encountered before. He didn't push when I pulled away. He listened when I finally told him about my father, really listened without offering hollow platitudes or easy solutions. That must have been incredibly painful, was all he said, his eyes reflecting genuine empathy. Thank you for trusting me enough to share that. Slowly, cautiously, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps not everyone leaves. Perhaps some people stay. My career advanced steadily during this period. The junior marketing position evolved into a role managing campaigns for major clients. My salary increased, bringing a financial stability I had never known as an adult. I was able to help Mum more substantially, which eased some of my constant worry about her welfare. After 12 years in the same house, the house she had shared with Mum finally agreed it was time to downsize. The maintenance had become too much, the property taxes too high. But packing meant confronting all the items she had preserved as a shrine to Dad's eventual return. We spent a weekend sorting through his belongings. Mum insisted on keeping key items, his watch, his favourite books, the sweater she had knitted for him the Christmas before he left. Everything else we donated. Watching the truck drive away with boxes of his clothes was the closest thing to closure we had experienced in over a decade. James proposed on my 31st birthday. The ring was nothing flashy, a simple solitaire that caught the light beautifully, but the commitment it represented terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. I said yes, then spent the entire night panicking, wondering if I was making a mistake, if I even knew how to be part of a healthy relationship. James held me through that panic, his steady presence an anchor in the storm of my emotions. Wedding planning brought the inevitable question, who would walk me down the aisle? Mum suggested her brother, my Uncle Dave, but the thought felt wrong somehow. In the end, I chose to walk alone. I have been finding my own way forward for 12 years, I told Mum. This seems fitting, she nodded, understanding, but I caught her glancing at the door during the ceremony as if still half expecting Dad to burst in at the last minute to claim his rightful place. Mum seemed to find new purpose after we sold the house. She moved into a sunny condo closer to my neighbourhood and began volunteering at a community centre teaching English to immigrants. New friends entered her life, particularly a widow's support group, though she wasn't technically a widow. For the first time, she seemed to be creating an identity separate from the woman whose husband disappeared. My hard work and dedication at the marketing firm paid off with a major promotion to Director of Client Services. The position came with a substantial salary increase and stock options. Financial anxiety, my constant companion since adolescence, began to loosen its grip on me. James and I established our own traditions and routines, deliberately creating a family culture different from the one I had grown up in. We communicated openly even when it was difficult. We planned for the future rather than being haunted by the past. We bought our first home together, a charming Tudor-style house with a garden where James planted vegetables and I cultivated roses. The most unexpected blessing arrived during this period of rebuilding. My maternal grandmother passed away, leaving me a substantial inheritance in the form of investments. The financial advisor explained that with careful management, This nest egg could provide significant security for our future. For someone whose life had been defined by insecurity for so long, this felt like a miracle. A local business magazine featured me in their 40 Under 40 issue, highlighting my work on an award-winning campaign. Seeing my picture and the story of my professional success in print gave me a sense of validation I hadn't realized I needed. I had built something solid and meaningful despite everything. When I discovered I was pregnant, my joy was complicated by fear. What did I know about parenting when my own experience had been so fractured? What if I couldn't provide the stability a child deserves? James found me crying one night after a positive pregnancy test. "You are not your father," he said simply, holding my hands in his. "You know exactly what not to do because you lived through it. You will be an amazing mother because you understand how precious and important it is to be present." Mum's excitement about becoming a grandmother seemed to breathe new life into her. She knitted blankets and tiny hats. She researched the safest cribs and car seats. She offered to move closer to help with childcare. The prospect of a new generation seemed to help her finally turn toward the future, rather than remaining anchored to the past. When my daughter Lily was born, the surge of love I felt was transformative. Looking into her tiny face, I made silent promises. "I will never leave you. I will never make you wonder if you are enough. I will be here always." Mum moved into an apartment just 10 minutes from our house and became our regular babysitter when I returned to work. Seeing her with Lily, the joy and purpose it gave her, healed something in both of us. We were creating a new family story, one not defined by abandonment, but by the conscious choice to stay, to love, to be present. Our life settled into a rhythm that felt secure. James, Lily, Mum and me. We formed a complete circle. The ghost of my father no longer dominated our family narrative. We were thriving despite him, perhaps even because his absence had taught us to cherish those who choose to remain. This was our new normal, and it was good. It was enough, until the phone rang on that Sunday evening and shattered the peace we had so painstakingly built. We were having our regular Sunday dinner at my house. James had grilled steaks, and Mum had brought her famous potato salad. Lily now too was babbling happily in her high chair, smashing peas with enthusiastic determination. The normality of the scene makes what happened next feel even more surreal in my memory. Mum's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, frowned at the unknown number, but answered anyway. I watched her expression transform from mild curiosity to shock, the blood draining from her face so rapidly I thought she might faint. "Who is it?" I mouthed silently across the table. She looked at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. "It is your father," she whispered, her hand trembling around the phone. The world tilted sideways. 15 years of silence, and now suddenly a phone call. I felt rage boiling up inside me, hot and immediate. James must have sensed it because he quietly took Lily from her high chair and carried her to the living room, giving us privacy. "Put him on speaker," I demanded, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. Mum complied, her fingers fumbling with the buttons. "Emily, are you still there?" The voice that came through was familiar, yet different, older, raspier, but unmistakably his. "We are both here," Mum said. "Helena too." There was a pause. "Helena," he said, my name sounding wrong in his mouth after so many years. "You must be all grown up now." "What do you want?" I asked coldly. "I would like to see you both," he said, "to explain, to apologize." Mum immediately said, "Yes, of course," while I simultaneously said, "Absolutely not." This led to our first real argument in years. After the call ended with arrangements to meet at a restaurant downtown later that week, I unleashed 15 years of suppressed anger. "How can you agree to see him just like that after everything he put us through?" Mum's response stunned me. "Because I have been waiting 15 years for an explanation. Do not take that chance away from me." That night, I barely slept. James held me while I alternated between rage and anxiety. "You do not have to go," James said gently. "You owe him nothing." "But I owe Mom everything," I replied. "She needs closure. I have to be there to protect her." The next few days passed in a haze. What should I wear to meet the man who abandoned me? What would I say? Should I show him pictures of his granddaughter, or would that be giving him access to a life he had no right to share? I rehearsed bitter speeches in my head, then discarded them as insufficient. When the day arrived, Mum spent hours getting ready. She coloured her grey hair back to brown. She wore a dress I had never seen before. The hope in her eyes was painful to witness. The drive to the restaurant was silent. Mum kept smoothing her dress nervously. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. We spotted him immediately upon entering. He sat at a corner table, older, thinner, his once dark hair now salted with grey. He stood when he saw us, his expression a mixture of hope and fear. Mum rushed forward while I hung back, studying the man who had haunted our lives with his absence. He hugged her awkwardly, then extended his hand to me. I left it hanging in the air between us. "Helena," he said, his voice catching. "You look so much like your mother." The initial conversation was stilted, careful. He commented on the weather, the restaurant asked if we still lived in the same house. Mum answered eagerly while I remained silent, watching him closely. When he spoke about needing to find himself and making difficult choices, I noticed he never quite made eye contact. "Where have you been living?" I finally asked directly. "Arizona mostly," he replied. "Sometime in Nevada." "And what brought you back now?" The question that mattered most. He hesitated. "I have been following your career from afar. The article about you in Business Monthly mentioned your success. I realized how much I had missed, how much I had thrown away. I wanted to make amends." Something in his wording triggered my suspicion. He had been following my career. The article had mentioned not only my professional achievements, but also alluded to my grandmother's inheritance. "What kind of work have you been doing?" I asked. His answer was vague, consulting odd jobs, some investments that hadn't quite panned out. As he spoke, I noticed the frayed cuffs of his shirt, the scuffed shoes. This was not a man who had found success during his absence. Mum did not seem to notice any of this. She was rapt, accepting every word, every flimsy excuse. When he reached across the table to take her hand, she let him a smile, transforming her face into something youthful and hopeful. It broke my heart to see. As the evening progressed, my father asked more questions about my life, my house, my job, my investments. Each question seemed to probe for financial information rather than emotional connection. When he mentioned he had heard about Grandma Catherine's passing and asked if she had remembered you in her will, the last piece fell into place. He had not come back for reconciliation. He had come back for money. Over the next few weeks, my father insinuated himself back into our lives with a calculated precision that only I seemed to notice. He met James and cooed appropriately over pictures of Lily, though he showed no interest in actually meeting his granddaughter. He took Mum to dinner at restaurants nicer than his worn appearance suggested he could afford. He reminisced about their past together, skillfully editing out his 15-year disappearance. Mum blossomed under his attention. She started wearing makeup again, bought new clothes, laughed in a way I hadn't heard in years. Her joy made my suspicions feel cruel, but I couldn't ignore the red flags that kept appearing. Dad's questions about my work became more specific. "That promotion must have come with stock options," he commented casually during one dinner. "And property values in your neighborhood have really increased from what I hear." He mentioned an investment opportunity multiple times, something vague involving a business partner and guaranteed returns. "The initial capital is the hurdle," he explained, "but the payoff would secure all our futures." While Mum was entranced, I was suspicious. I began researching where my father had been during his absence. Using my marketing firm's resources, I hired a discreet private investigator to dig into his past. The results confirmed my worst fears. Thomas Wright had spent time in Arizona and Nevada, as he claimed, but primarily in casinos. There were gambling debts, failed business ventures, and even a bankruptcy filing. His business partner had 2 fraud convictions. I confronted him on a day when Mum was busy with her volunteer work. We met at a coffee shop where he greeted me with the artificial warmth he had perfected. "I know why you are really back," I said without preamble. His expression flickered, then settled into confusion. "To reconnect with my family, of course." "You came back because you found out I have money," I stated flatly. "You have gambling debts. You need cash. This whole reconciliation is a scam." He dropped the pretense so quickly it was almost impressive. "Not entirely a scam," he said, lowering his voice. "I do want to reconnect. But yes, I need help. Is that so wrong?" For a father to ask his successful daughter for assistance? "You stopped being my father when you walked out without a word 15 years ago." He leaned forward. "Look, I made a mistake, but you turned out fine, better than fine. You have a great career, a nice husband, financial security. My leaving clearly did not damage you permanently." The casual dismissal of the pain he had caused left me speechless. He continued outlining his situation in more detail. He owed money to people who wouldn't take no for an answer. His business venture with his partner required immediate capital. If I helped him now, he would pay me back double within 6 months. "And if I refuse?" I asked. His expression hardened. "Then I will disappear again. How do you think your mother would handle losing me a second time?" "She is finally happy again. Do you really want to be responsible for destroying that happiness? The threat hung in the air between us. He was using Mom's fragile emotional state as leverage against me. It was breathtakingly cruel and strategically effective. I consulted James that night, explaining everything. He is trying to extort money from me by threatening to hurt Mom emotionally. James was furious. We should tell your mother immediately and break her heart. She is happier than she has been in 15 years. A happiness built on lies, James pointed out gently. Meanwhile, Dad increased the pressure. He began charming Mum with talk of making up for lost time. He suggested they might travel together once his business situation stabilized. He even hinted at moving back to Minnesota permanently. The final straw came when I discovered he was still gambling. Mom mentioned casually that he had asked her for a small loan to tide him over until his investments matured. She was planning to liquidate part of her retirement savings to help him. I couldn't let that happen. Despite my fear of hurting her, it was time for the truth. I arranged for us all to meet at Mom's apartment. When we arrived, Dad was already there helping Mum prepare dinner as if they were still a happily married couple. The domesticity of the scene made what I was about to do even more difficult. Mum, we need to talk about why Dad really came back, I said once we were all seated. Dad shot me a warning look which I ignored. He did not come back to reconcile. He came back because he found out about my inheritance and my career success. He needs money to pay gambling debts. Mum looked from me to him, confusion clouding her features. Thomas, tell her that is not true. Instead of denying it, he tried a different approach. Emily, yes, I do need some financial help, but that does not mean I do not still care for you. I produced the file the private investigator had compiled evidence of his gambling problem, his debts, his failed schemes. As Mum read through it, her hands began to tremble. You were going to ask me for money, she whispered. Just a loan, he said, his charm evaporating as his plan unraveled. Just until my ship comes in. Your ship, I interjected. You have been waiting for your ship to come in for 15 years while Mom waited for you to come home. The difference is she waited out of love. You came back out of greed. Dad's true colours finally emerged when he realised his scheme had failed. You always were a difficult child, he snapped at me. Too smart for your own good. He turned to Mum with one last attempt at manipulation. Emily, we can still make this work. Do not let Helena poison what we have rebuilt. But Mum had seen enough. What we rebuilt was a fantasy, she said quietly. Please leave. His face contorted with anger. Fine, but do not come crying to me when you are old and alone. I would rather be alone than be used, Mum replied, her voice gaining strength. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Mum collapsed onto the sofa, her body shaking with silent sobs. I held her while the truth she had avoided for 15 years finally broke over her like a wave. The revelation about my father's true motives hit my mother hard. Her health, which had improved in recent months, deteriorated rapidly. She developed insomnia and lost her appetite. The sparkle that had returned to her eyes vanished, replaced by a wounded, haunted look that was almost worse than the sadness she had carried during his absence. I insisted she come stay with us. James converted our home office into a comfortable bedroom where she could be surrounded by family while processing her grief. Lily's innocent presence proved to be the best medicine. It is difficult to remain completely in despair when a toddler is offering you half-chewed crackers as tokens of affection. Meanwhile, my father refused to accept his defeat gracefully. He called repeatedly, alternating between apologies, justifications, and thinly veiled threats. When we blocked his number, he began sending emails. When those went unanswered, he escalated. One Tuesday morning, he appeared at my workplace, causing a scene in the reception area that required security intervention. I just need 5 minutes with my daughter, he kept saying, his voice carrying down the hallway to my office. Is that too much to ask after all these years? The security guard, a kind man named Carl, who had worked in the building for decades, escorted him outside. That man does not seem stable, he warned me afterward. Be careful. I consulted a lawyer about a restraining order. The process was straightforward, but would require court appearances that would prolong our contact with him rather than severing it. We decided to wait and see if his interest would fade once he realized no money would be forthcoming. It did not. Instead, he began contacting other family members. He called my Uncle Dave with sob stories about being misunderstood. He reached out to cousins I had barely spoken to in years. He even tracked down James's parents, spinning a tale about wanting to be part of his granddaughter's life. The final straw was a lengthy email he sent full of emotional blackmail and thinly disguised threats. "This is your last chance to help your father," he wrote. "Family helps family. I would hate for your mother to suffer the consequences of your stubbornness." After consulting with James and the lawyer, I composed a response that took me 3 days to perfect. In it, I detailed exactly what his abandonment had done to us. The therapy sessions, the financial struggles, the missed milestones, the emotional scars that would never completely heal. I explained that his return had caused fresh trauma, particularly to my mother, who had defended him for 15 years, only to discover he had returned solely for financial gain. I concluded by making it clear that any further contact would result in legal action. "You forfeited your right to be my father the day you walked out," I wrote. "No amount of manipulation will change that fact. We have built a life without you. We will continue to thrive without you." James read it before I sent it, holding me when the inevitable tears came. "Are you sure you want to send this?" he asked gently. "I am not sending it for him," I replied. "I am sending it for me. For 15 years, he controlled our lives with his absence. I will not let him control us now with his presence." Throughout this period, Mum slowly began to process her feelings about Dad's return and true motivations. The betrayal was in many ways worse than the abandonment had been. "At least before I could imagine there was a noble reason," she confided one evening as we sat on the porch swing. "Now I know he just did not care enough to stay." I helped her find a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma. Initially resistant, she eventually agreed to weekly sessions that provided her tools to process her grief. "I am not just grieving his second leaving," she explained after one particularly difficult session. "I am finally grieving the first one properly, and I am grieving the 15 years I spent waiting for someone who never intended to return." Dad's business venture predictably collapsed within months. Through family connections, we heard he had moved to Florida, presumably to pursue new victims for his schemes. The knowledge that he was no longer in Minnesota brought a palpable sense of relief to our household. In what felt like a symbolic act of defiance, Mum finally removed her wedding ring. The pale band of skin it had protected for decades gradually tanned to match the rest of her hand, physical proof that healing while slow was possible. The most powerful moment came the day Dad showed up uninvited at Mom's new apartment. She had moved back to her own place after 2 months with us, insisting she needed to stand on her own feet again. When Dad knocked on her door, instead of calling me in panic, she handled it herself. "I told him he needed to leave," she reported when she called me after. "He tried to tell me how much he missed me, how he had made a terrible mistake coming back for the wrong reasons." I said, "The mistake was me waiting 15 years for someone who did not deserve another thought." Then I closed the door. Her voice contained something I had not heard before, not just strength, but a kind of peace that comes from standing in your truth. "Were you scared?" I asked. "Terrified," she admitted, "but also powerful. For the first time, I was seeing him clearly without the filter of what I wanted him to be." I arrived at her apartment 20 minutes later to find her crying, but these were different tears than the ones she had shed over him before. These were healing tears, washing away the last vestiges of false hope she had carried for so long. We began rebuilding our family bonds stronger than before. James became the rock we both leaned on during difficult moments. My daughter Lily brought uncomplicated joy into spaces that had been filled with complexity and pain. And Mum and I developed a new kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect for the strength we had both shown in facing the truth. When Lily asked about her grandfather for the first time, I was prepared with an answer that was honest without being traumatizing. "Sometimes people make choices that take them away from their families," I explained. "It is sad, but it has nothing to do with you. You have so many people who love you and will always be here." She seemed satisfied with this explanation, returning to her toys with the resilience only children possess. Watching her, I realized that my father's legacy of abandonment would end with me. My daughter would grow up knowing she was securely loved, that family meant showing up day after day in both the extraordinary moments and the mundane ones. The healing was not linear. There were still days when anger overwhelmed me, when the injustice of what he had done felt fresh and raw. But those days grew fewer as we focused on building our future rather than being defined by our past. One evening, I found Mom looking through old photo albums, something she had avoided for years. "I am not erasing him from our history," she explained. "That would be like erasing parts of myself, parts of you. But I am putting him in perspective. He was one chapter in a much longer story." Her wisdom struck me deeply. We could acknowledge the pain he had caused without allowing it to determine the course of our lives moving forward. We could recognize the impact of his choices without giving him the power to make new wounds. As we closed the photo album together, I realized we had both finally found the strength to set boundaries that should have been established years before. We had learned painfully but permanently that sometimes the most loving choice you can make is to close the door on those who have proven they cannot be trusted with your heart. A year after my father's failed attempt to exploit our family, we gathered for a celebration of Mum's 60th birthday. The transformation in her was remarkable to everyone who had known her during the waiting years. Her hair, which she had stopped colouring, shimmered silver in the sunlight streaming through the windows of the restaurant we had booked for the occasion. Her laugh came easily now, no longer the careful, guarded sound it had been for so long. "Emily, you look 10 years younger," her friend Sandra commented, and it was true. Acceptance had lightened her in ways hope never could. Mum had begun dating Richard, a kind retired history teacher she met through her volunteer work. He was nothing like my father, quiet, thoughtful, transparent in his affections. He brought her books he thought she would enjoy and listened attentively when she spoke. Most importantly, he had no interest in her finances or connections. His comfortable pension and modest savings meant he had no need for anything but her company. My own career continued to flourish. The promotion to executive position came with challenges, but also deep satisfaction. Leading a team of creative professionals mentoring younger marketers, seeing campaigns succeed, these achievements felt particularly meaningful given how close we had come to financial disaster in the years after Dad left. That summer, we took a family vacation to the California coast, James, Lily, Mum Richard, and me. Standing on the beach, watching the sunset with Lily running in and out of the waves, and James taking photographs, I was struck by how complete our family felt. There were no shadows, no empty spaces we were preserving for someone who would never return. After we returned, Mum did something that surprised me. She brought over the album from her and Dad's wedding. "I want you to have this," she said, placing it in my hands. "Are you sure?" I asked, understanding the significance of this gesture. "It is part of your history, not just mine," she said. "But I do not need it anymore. I am ready to fill my shelves with new memories." That night, after Lily was asleep, I looked through the album. The young couple smiling from those pages were strangers to me now. I tried to reconcile the image of that beaming groom with the manipulative man who had returned solely to exploit us. Perhaps both versions were true in their own way. People are capable of change sometimes for the worse rather than the better. This experience led me to profound realizations about forgiveness and acceptance. Forgiveness, I came to understand, did not mean welcoming someone back into your life regardless of their actions. It did not mean pretending the hurt never happened. Rather, forgiveness was an internal process of releasing the consuming anger that could otherwise poison your own heart. Acceptance was equally complex. It meant acknowledging reality without sugarcoating it. My father was not coming back with noble explanations or genuine remorse. He had revealed his true character, and accepting that truth, however painful, was ultimately liberating. The remaining items of my father's that Mum had kept for years were finally donated to a homeless shelter. His winter coat would warm someone who needed it, rather than hanging in a closet awaiting an owner who would never return. There was poetry in that transformation, something preserved out of misplaced hope, becoming useful in the present. Mum completely redecorated her apartment, choosing colours and styles she had always liked, but Dad had vetoed. "I spent 15 years keeping things exactly as they were when he left," she reflected as we hung new curtains. "I never gave myself permission to discover what I actually preferred." I recognise the signs of healthy relationships more clearly now, both through my own experience with James and by observing Mum and Richard. Consistency, transparency, mutual respect. These qualities, once taken for granted, now seemed like precious gifts to be cherished and nurtured. I began mentoring other adults who had experienced parental abandonment, sharing the hard-won wisdom that had emerged from our family's journey. The person who leaves without explanation is telling you something important about themselves, not about you, I would tell them. Your worth is not determined by those who fail to recognize it. In a moment of particular clarity, Mum said something I will never forget. "I waited 15 years for the wrong reason," she told me as we sat in her garden. "I waited because I could not imagine being complete without him. Now I realize I was always complete. He was the one who was missing pieces, the capacity for commitment, for genuine love, for honesty." Her words resonated deeply. I had spent years wondering what we had done wrong, what flaw in us had driven him away. The truth was simpler and more liberating. The deficiency was his, not ours. The financial independence that had attracted my father's unwelcome attention had ironically been the very thing that gave me power to reject his manipulation. By building my own security, I had created a foundation too strong for him to undermine. There was a lesson there about the unexpected forms protection can take. My relationship with James deepened through this final chapter of the abandonment saga. His unwavering support, his willingness to stand beside me through the messy, painful confrontations confirmed what I had slowly come to believe, that there are people in this world who choose to stay, who see commitment not as a burden, but as a privilege. Mum shared her hard-earned wisdom one evening as we sat on my porch swing watching Lily play in the yard with her father. "The trick," she said softly, "is to love people for who they actually are, not for who you hope they will become." I spent 15 years loving a ghost, a possibility, rather than a reality. What freedom there is in loving what is real, even with all its imperfections. I often think about what I would tell my 17-year-old self if I could go back to that day when Dad disappeared. I would tell her that the path forward would be harder than she could imagine, but that she would find strength she did not know she possessed. I would tell her that family is not always blood. It is the people who show up, who stay, who choose you day after day. I would tell her that some people will return not for you, but for what you have, and that recognizing the difference is one of life's most valuable skills. Our family dinner tradition continues every Sunday. Mum brings dessert, Richard often brings interesting historical anecdotes that make us laugh, James grills when weather permits, and Lily entertains us all with her increasing vocabulary and imagination. These gatherings are not shadowed by an empty chair or unspoken hopes. We are fully present with each other, grateful for the family we have chosen and that has chosen us in return. My father never contacted us again after his final rejection. I sometimes wonder where he is, what schemes he may be running, whether he ever reflects on what he threw away, not once, but twice. But these thoughts no longer carry the weight they once did. He made his choices. We made ours. And in the end, we built something beautiful and strong from the broken pieces he left behind. Have you ever experienced someone returning to your life with hidden motives? How did you recognize their true intentions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve people who choose them for who they are, not for what they have. Remember, you are worthy of genuine love and commitment, nothing less. Thank you for listening to my story.